Before I get started, I just want to say that every single time that I have an opportunity to speak about cannabis, I really don't take it for granted because I've been doing it for a very long time, as Michael said, and like standing here on stage in South Africa, it's a surreal experience. I know many people that are in prison for this amazing sacred plant and have gotten all kinds of legal, physical, all kinds of stigmas around that. So first, I want to thank the organizers of Canatech for giving me this opportunity to share and to also learn on this amazing platform. And second of all, I want to thank each and every one of you that came out here to share your knowledge and to learn and give back, because the way that we're going to remove this stigma is by taking this information and sharing it with other people. And that's the only way we're going to get this passed. So I want to, everybody give yourselves a round of applause for coming out here, making time, and making a contribution. Thank you so much. So this is a definitive statement. I'm going to try to keep this to only one definitive statement. Cannabis is personal. And the way cannabis is personal is that each and every one of us can consume the same exact cultivar, the same exact strain, and some of us may have a completely different experience than others. So there is a personal experience with everybody. And the way we respond to cannabis is a personal experience. I'm going to give this, I have an hour-long talk, so I have to do it in 20 minutes. I'm going to speed through certain things. So if you have any expectations, like kind of lower them a little bit, maybe quick, but I'll be here for questions afterwards. So I want to talk about the complexity of the plant first. The plant is complex. There's many different components in the plant, and it makes it really, really difficult to find what works for the individual. And we also have this very complex endocannabinoid system. I know people spoke about the endocannabinoid system. It's a primary regulatory system. It regulates many different things within our bodies, body temperature, mineral waste, etc. But one of the things that I want to focus on, not to get too deep, is think about it this way. Prior to 1992, our healthcare professionals were treating us without the knowledge of this primary regulatory system even existing. So, and there's plenty of healthcare professionals that don't believe the existence of the endocannabinoid system right now. So we have this incredibly complex system, and there's thousands of cultivars, or I refer to them as cultivars, not strains, because Dr. Ethan Russo told me that a strain refers to a virus. And this plant is far from a virus. It's a sacred therapeutic plant. So we'll refer to it as cultivars and chemovars, and to keep it straight. So there's also hundreds of different cannabinoids. Think about it this way. So I was doing a talk in California with Dr. David Miri, they call him Betty for anybody who knows, and he was saying that in his lab they identified around 500 different molecules in the plant. I was in the lab seeing molecules identified on different instruments that are in the cannabis plant. We don't know what they are, but they're identified in the plant, they're there. So that says something about these individual components and these isolated molecules, because you have all these different molecules, not to mention just the molecules of the plant. You have the acid version of the molecule that's in the raw plant before it actually gets decarboxylated through heating, drops the acid molecule. So you have research in the acid side, you have research in the pre-oxidation side, because the cannabinoids start as CBGA and they oxidize to different cannabinoids, and then you have the non-acid form, and they all have to work together. Then you have terpenes and terpenoids. So these are basically the glandular secretion the plant produces. All plants produce a form of essential oils, basically. And in cannabis, they're not unique to the cannabis plant, but they're unique in the way they work with the cannabinoids, the genetics of the plant. So how many ever heard of indica and sativa? Well, it's pretty much bullshit. There is no such thing as indica and sativa anymore, because we bred out most of the original strains or cultivars to be able to breed for certain kind of chemovars that have high THC and bred most of those things out. But if you think about it, the original plants that dated back to thousands of years ago in Southeast Asia, if you look at the way they grew and you kind of look at their smell them, they produced a skunky diesely smell, and that's associated with myrcene, which is a more sedative type of terpene. And then once it grew more in a humid, sun-grown kind of climate, like here, like the Durban original cultivars, they produced a more flowery type of smell in the Caribbean, and they are associated with limonene, which gives you a little bit of boost of dopamine and serotonin. So the complexity of the plant are there. Now, I lied. I'm making another definitive statement. So 99% of us are identical genetically. It's a 0.1% that makes all the difference in the world. And that 0.1% means that our genotype, that's unique to us. And that's what makes us, us, that we inherit from our parents. So trying to find something that's specific to you can be like finding a needle in a haystack. It can be painful, frustrating, and expensive, as we heard. So this is a formulation ratio that was suggested to me for a daytime kind of formulation that I should be consuming. Does anybody see anything unique in this image? Anything that stands out? Maybe on top? This is actually an image of my desktop. And you see all the tabs open? The reason I show this is that's what happens in my brain. So I have ADD. I was diagnosed with ADD when I was a kid, and my type of ADD is that I have all these tabs that are open in my brain all the time, and this is the way it sort of functioned. And it became my superpower when I learned how to utilize it correctly. But man, growing up, it was an extremely difficult type of thing because until they put me on all kinds of medication, until I discovered cannabis as my go-to medicine, and then trying to figure out what type of cannabis works for me, it was extremely frustrating. And not only that, well, my parents come from the old country, they really didn't like it, so they ended up asking me to leave. Well, not really asking me to leave, they kicked me out. But they did something even more than that. They called the police on me and tried to have me arrested. The irony of this is that my parents actually consume formulations right now that I helped to develop for their aches and pains, arthritis, and everything else. So it all came full circle because of the education and the removal of that stigma. They actually changed their minds as well. So really briefly, for the sake of time, my career, I was, since I became an activist, I was the president of the Cannabis Action Network. I was a dispensary owner. At the end, I only wanted to focus on how can we use this amazing plant to help benefit many people. And that was my goal. And I thought I could do that through owning dispensaries in California, through formulating specifics. And one of the challenges that we always had was we would have different strains or cultivars for people. And somebody says, I took my Blue Dream and it's not working the same way. Well, it's not working the same way because maybe it's not really Blue Dream. So I became obsessed, and that's kind of my ADD. When I can hyper-focus on one thing, that became my obsession to find what is in this strain or in this cultivar. So I started working on the genetics of the plant. Doing genetic sequencing, we would have 10 different Blue Dreams, or 10 different Mauis, or 10 different Durbans, and we would see genetically, 5 of them are related. 2 of them are long-distance cousins, and the other ones are not even close. So we started a library, and then looking at the human genetic side, we started seeing that there are genes in certain single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs as you call them, that have a relationship to your experience with the genetics of the plant. So is it possible to have endocompatibility? Is that even possible that we can find something that genetically aligns with you as an individual? The goal of what we try to do is avoid or prevent as much as possible an adverse event. So if somebody has an adverse event, they say, hey, consume cannabis and it made me paranoid, or it gave me a panic attack, or it made me feel, not my best. And then they go and communicate that to other people and say, hey, don't consume this plant, it's not gonna work for you in that same way. That's what we try to do, is avoid an adverse event. So why do we have receptors in our body? And I'm going to skip through this section really quickly, but I just wanted to say that no matter where I travel, I just came back from Mexico City, and I was in Colombia a little bit before that, and this amazing plant actually unites people. So when we're able to have a conversation with people through this plant, we're able to connect. And the reason why is cannabis is inside of us in a certain way. So we have these receptors that are part of our endocannabinoid system. We have a CB1 receptor that's associated more with an affinity to THC. And think about it as the brain and central nervous system association. We have CB2 receptors that's associated with your immune and digestive system. And think of it as CBD has an affinity more to that, which creates enzymes that help regulate digestive and immune functionality. And there is some talk about a CB3 receptor, and I'm not going to get into that in much detail. But I want to talk about the two primary endogenous endocannabinoids we produce ourselves. Anandamide, which the word anand or anand in Sanskrit means bliss. So think of it as your bliss hormone. And THC attaches to the CB1 receptor, and it helps to be able to stimulate that. And there's also 2-AG, which is the second endogenous endocannabinoid. So that second endogenous endocannabinoid works really well with CBD and, as I mentioned before, these enzymes. So the reason why I bring this up is I wanted to talk about the relationship of DNA and your endocannabinoid system as an example. So I'm going to talk about stress. So my mom always told me that, limit my stress. Every disease is associated with stress. Stress causes diseases. She may be right, but being curious, I always want to know how. So there is a genetic component to this, and it's associated with cannabis, and it's associated with your endocannabinoid system. So there's a gene called FAH, F-A-H, and that gene produces an enzyme that breaks down or synthesizes anandamide. And we all know anandamide is our bliss hormone because we just talked about it. So when we have a certain genotype, it's actually homozygous genotype, but not to get deep into it, that shows that a person may be producing less anandamide than the average population. So this is something that happens as a stressful event. So somebody cuts us off in traffic. We have a stressful event. So all these different chemicals are released in our body: dopamine, adrenaline, norepinephrine, cortisol, which our body really, really doesn't like, our immune system doesn't like over periods of time. Our body then realizes a lion is not chasing us. That fight or flight has to subside, so it releases an anandamide to be able to stabilize and get us back into balance and homeostasis. But if we're producing less anandamide, then that becomes a challenge. And THC, since it mimics the way anandamide works in our bodies, high dose of THC to certain people that have this genotype can actually trigger the stressful event or the fight or flight in certain people. So when people say, I can't consume cannabis because it makes me paranoid or it creates a stressful event, we can genetically show that this person is predisposed to that and maybe avoid an adverse event. So we'll talk about Grandma Mary for a second. So Grandma Mary, first of all, how many people ever had a negative experience with an edible? So we all know that your liver converts THC to a different substance called levodopa hydroxide. But Grandma Mary, 50 or so years ago, consumed, she was at a party and she ate a cannabis brownie. And Grandma had an awful experience. She really didn't like it. She started getting paranoid, all these things. So she swore off the devil's lettuce, said never again. Unfortunately, Grandma Mary got diagnosed with cancer and she was living in an assisted living facility. And she was watching CNN and watched, for those of you in the United States who know, or maybe Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who was talking about cannabis as an alternative to help with the side effects of chemo and cancer. So she decided to give it another shot. And who wouldn't believe a TV doctor, right? So she went to a dispensary and told the person working there about the experience she had, and he recommended chocolate. so cannabis infused. So she said, take it easy, Grandma, don't eat too much, take a little chunk first. So Grandma went back and she ate that chocolate. And Grandma had an awful experience, even worse. She started hallucinating. She thought she was dying. And it was an awful experience. And if Grandma only knew that she was an ultra poor metabolizer of THC through her digestive system, she could have taken her cannabis under her tongue, sublingually, buccally, inhaled it, and avoided her first pass because she's an ultra poor metabolizer. And that's exactly what happened. So understanding your metabolic function can help with dosing, and it can help with understanding the method of consumption that's more personally aligned with you. So what if there was a test? What if we could do something in the beginning that would actually remove the obstacles of having an adverse event? And it's scientifically backed, and it actually allows you to get results and showing you an optimal way to go. Well, we built a test. It's called the EndoDNA test. And I just wanted to make sure that I explain this properly in the way that it works. So your DNA is your roadmap. So what DNA does, it actually shows you what you have predispositions for. So if you're predisposed to something, it doesn't mean that that gene is going to show up and express itself. So think of this as your GPS, right? So it shows you what road to follow, that this road may have traffic, it has maybe an accident on it, so maybe this is a road you want to avoid and take this road. It doesn't guarantee that on this road, you're not going to have some potholes along the way. So what we're looking at is your genetic predisposition, and the next phase of our research is your genetic expression, which is called epigenetics. The way that you trigger a genetic expression is through your nutrition, your mental state, many different factors. So just because you have a genetic predisposition, and by the way, consuming certain types of cannabinoids and terpenes can actually express that gene and provide you that experience. So how does it work? Well, you get a kit on EndoDNA, it comes to your home, you swab the inside your mouth, you register, and I want to make sure that this is really important because we take pride we're HIPAA compliant in the United States, we're an international company, and the way it works is we anonymize all data. Nobody cares about Len May's personal information. We want to make sure that we have people in different genotypes that have consumed a certain type of cannabinoid ratio and have produced a result. So looking at that data is extremely important to us. So everything is anonymized and it's within your private portal. We show your endocompatibility profile as it relates to different symptomatic conditions. Anxiety, pain, sleep, cognitive function, metabolic function, all these different things. We show you your genotype, and then we show you what type of cannabinoid and terpene profile is best for you to consume to avoid an adverse event. The next phase of what we're doing is we're looking at certificates of analysis for different types of cultivars or formulations, and we're aligning that through an algorithm and geolocating, showing you that based on this information, this is where you can get the closest matching cannabinoid and terpene profile that's more aligned with you. So what our goal is to create fewer surprises. There's a couple of things I want to mention here that is really, really important. Not only know what works best for you, but avoiding an adverse reaction. And one of the things that really concerns me personally is in the United States and some in Canada, we have these gas station CBD. So gas station CBD, like 5,000 milligrams of CBD. Well, if people understand that you can have a reduction of efficacy of your prescription medication with certain cannabinoids, that's extremely important. So if people are consuming CBD with their SSRI, which is your antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication, or your blood thinner medication like warfarin, CBD can actually reduce the efficacy or affect the efficacy. So be aware of that. And at the end of the day, we want you to feel empowered. So you have the knowledge and information to be able to make more informed decisions about your cannabis use. And that's really the overall goal. So my time is up. I just want to go through a couple of reasons why we do this. And we do this to make sure that people have an experience. The only one that I want to focus on is this one, because Laura wrote us the other day and said that she's been a medical patient for many years. She's consumed cannabis, and one time she took a concentrate, which was a lot of THC. She had a panic attack. From then on, every single time she would consume cannabis, she had a panic attack. Until because her gene that was dormant was triggered through that concentrate. So now we were able to find a ratio, and a ratio, as she wrote, that allowed her to be herself again. And that's what we want to do. So I encourage each and every person here to be able to contribute to the overall research. We use AI, we use deep learning, it's lifetime updates. The more research we have, the more empowered we are as an industry. The information we get, we're sharing it back with the industry so we can make better formulations, make better cultivars, and be able to raise ourselves as an industry. At the end of the day, that's the way we're going to be able to remove that stigma and get to the next phase in this industry. So I thank everybody for your time. I appreciate it. If anybody has any questions, I'll be available. Thank you so much.